Hang on, let's make sure everything is live. Okay, I think we're good. Okay. All right. Nice to see you. I'm going to do a little bit of a live today about parental alienation and if therapists are to blame. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Lindsay Glass. I have some new followers. Thank you for following. I'm sort of new to this world of family alienation, and I found my way here because I wrote a book about my own experience. I do have a company called Reach Out Recovery, so I am a speaker and authority on addiction recovery and mental health. And as the years passed and I went through my own family stuff, I became more of an expert in family relationships. And obviously, after I wrote this book, reconciled with my own mom and wrote this book about it, it has completely given me a different platform. So, I am an author. I am a recovery advocate. I have been in recovery for a couple of decades. And I'm very passionate about helping people on their own journey, especially if I have been through it and I can give some advice. So, to give kind of a bigger picture of all of this, I want to back up and share a little bit about my own story, and then I will get into my own experience of family alienation because I was advised to go no contact with a parent by a therapist. It was a huge decision that had massive consequences to my life. And we ended up writing the books, my mom and I, and doing what we have done in the last few years after reconciling, because we both believe what happened was far too extreme. And that there are many places in this relationship, in this journey, where you can pull back before things go to no contact. So I grew up in New York City. I was a child of a famous author and a banker. So by all vision, I had a very, very good life. I would define myself as having come from a very good family. But what we had in our family was what I call a habit of fighting. There was a lot of blaming in the family. We shouted. Again, I'm Gen X, so we joke about being raised on hose water and neglect. But ideas about parenting were really different in those days. So I always like to put that stuff in for context because a lot of what our parents were doing was exactly what their parents did, and they really didn't know there was anything wrong with it. And at the time, I didn't either. So as the years go by, my mom and I, we were kind of the best of friends, but we could also just fight viciously. And as the years passed, what happened in our story is I experienced some trauma in my life. Um, a friend passed away, another friend completed suicide, and I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol. That was the time a big disconnect started between my mom and I because that's really where the lying started. Um, Now, my mom had a big career and her own life and a lot of stuff going on. So, I often say that what happened in our family really was the perfect storm. My parents had sometimes a tumultuous marriage, and there was just a lot going on that caused a lot of drama. So, as the years passed, we did not learn to treat each other with more respect. We just got more and more aggressive with our fighting. And again, it was very mixed. We could be the best of friends, but we could also really go at it. So, what was interesting was things actually got a lot better between us when I went into recovery. And I kind of thought that we were going to be okay because I had gotten sober. She had decided to stop drinking. I don't speak about her journey, but alcohol was a part of our family's life. Um, and she made the decision to stop drinking to support me. And I do think that that ultimately helped us to understand each other a little bit better and speak the same language. So we were sort of better for a while. We ended up starting a company together. And we started this company together and I was an adult. And I think this happens to a lot of parents of children who were addicts. I think the desire to keep them safe, keep an eye on them, and anything else that would go along with trying to parent a child who had had addiction problems. But a child who's had addiction problems, who's now an adult managing their own recovery, really doesn't want to be looked after like a little kid. So I think there was some, clashing around that. But basically, what we were playing out in our business was the same dysfunctional patterns that were being played out in our family. But this time in an office, in front of other people. And it's just no way to have a healthy relationship with somebody, but certainly no way to behave in the public eye. So things are just getting worse and worse between us, and we really just cannot get along. I mean, we're just screaming at each other at the top of our lungs. And at the time, I was seeing a therapist, and I was in my early 30s. And I want to be very clear, I'm not here to throw that therapist under the bus. I'm grateful for that therapist. She helped me in many ways. She said many things that I really needed to hear at that time, because this is what a lot of parents need to understand. When your kid is enraged or feels that they have all these ideas about what happened in their childhood or to them, I needed confirmation that my relationship with my mom was unhealthy. And I wasn't getting it from anybody other than this therapist. And I knew that it was unhealthy. And I wanted somebody to say to me, like, you're right about the way you're feeling. And she did. And I needed that to be able to feel sane in the situation that I was in at the time. So I don't think that she did any wrong there. Now, did I need to take her advice word for word and cut my mom out permanently, and take actions that would have severe consequences? Like, probably not. But that was for me to learn later on. But what I understand today, so I'm not mad at that therapist. She did what she thought was right. So part of what I understand today is that she only heard my side, my grief, my sadness, my rage. And let me tell you, I'm convincing when I want to be. So the therapist gave me advice that she thought was right, to go no contact and to block my mom. Now, what you have to remember out there is that I am a recovering addict. And when I was young, I was capable of self-harm. So this seemed like the correct action to tell a young person who was kind of having a mental breakdown at the time and could not stop fighting with her mom. I do not think that she was wrong to say, for your sobriety and your sanity, you need to leave and go somewhere else. Now, the actions I took were so severe and dramatic, that's why I talk a lot about this. I don't think they had to go the way they did. But for a mother and daughter who were literally driving each other mad, I do believe that a break was correct, because we could not get along or treat each other with respect at that time. And the therapist saw that I needed to get more help and that I needed to grow up on my own. And she was absolutely right for that. So, I can't fault her for that. So here's what you have to remember. I'm a grown up and I have free will. I didn't have to take her advice at that time. It was completely my choice to do what she told me to do. She told me what I wanted to hear, and that's what worked for me at that time. I ran with it, and parents need to remember, your adult child never has to do what their therapist tells them to do. If they're doing it, there's a part of them that wants to do it and believe it's the right thing to do. Okay, so that's sort of what happened. I cut her off, I blocked her, she didn't know where I was for 4 years, and I went off, and here's what was good. I learned how to be independent. My mom was a famous author. It was very hard being in her shadow. And it was very important for me to learn how to be independent. 2, I learned how to be self-sufficient. So, That was incredibly important too. So many times parents think they're helping a child by keeping them running even when things aren't going well, but for me, that wasn't a good thing. So I went to therapy. I went to 12-step programs. I went to life coaching. I went to retreats, and I went to anything that was recommended so that I could really heal and become the person that I wanted to be. I realized that all my problems weren't my parents' fault because suddenly they weren't in the picture and I was still me. That's very important to discover. I realized that I wasn't thriving because of my own poor choices. I realized that I needed to learn how to be accountable, responsible, and reliable in order to be the person I needed to be. So I would say I gained confidence by being on my own, and I gained self esteem by becoming self supporting and realizing that I'm competent without a parent. All of that absolutely needed to happen. Here's what was destructive: the entire family suffered as a result of our breakup. And I mean the entire family. It affected everyone and everything. So, siblings, spouses, extended family. It was really, really messy. And I regret that. Cutting my mom off like that was too harsh and made reconciliation way more difficult than it needed to be. Also, while moving across the country completely on my own with no support, forced me to grow up very fast. It was also very destabilizing for me. And I dealt with suicidal depression at one point during that time. So, kind of the takeaway for me is what I understand is we needed a break, but we didn't need a permanent, forever, end of the relationship. And what we needed was a referee, or somebody who could have really helped guide us in the right direction instead of guiding us apart. So I wanted to say, I think a lot of good came from the separation for both of us. My mom developed her own life, which she needed to do. I grew up and developed my life. And when the dysfunction is that bad, sometimes you really do need years of break in the pattern to create something new. But banishment, when somebody doesn't know it's coming or why, is very cruel and very painful. And I learned that the hard way. So, this is what I want to talk about because we've got a lot of young adults out there and adult children really angry at their parents. And parents are not perfect, but parents are people having a human experience. And I used to think that my parents had really done a lot of harm, that their behavior, that their divorce, that all of the things that they had done had caused me harm and were the reasons that I wasn't thriving. And I needed to unlearn that because that was not correct. The other thing that happened that's really important in my story is through my work in nonprofits, and part of my work and job on this planet that I care deeply about is I teach our books and our curricula and our programs in at-risk communities. So think reentry after jail, people who have been in gangs, people who have committed serious crimes, people going into recovery. I've taught in women's safe houses, homeless shelters, sex trafficking programs. And I learned what real abuse looks like. And it completely changed my thinking about parenting. I have so much compassion for parents who are just out there being human, dealing with their own complicated relationships, work trials, family issues, divorces, financial hardships. You know, I used to think that all of these things that my parents did were criminal. And then I saw what criminals actually did to their children. And I mean, there's no comparison. Parents who overshared or overspoiled or overmanaged their children really don't look bad when you've seen parents who have physically harmed their children or worse. So my perspective radically changed in the last few years. I mean, going back further than that. And it really helped me to understand that As an adult child, my job was not to blame my parents for being human and having a very human experience on this earth. My job was to fix myself and work on becoming the person that I wanted to be. Our parents are not protected from heartbreak or trauma, and they're not mental health professionals prepared to perfectly handle every issue that comes up with their kids. And we really need to give our parents some grace. Um, so I want to be clear when I tell you that because I cut my mom off like that, she was not ready to reconcile with me when I was. I had cut her off and I had disappeared for 4 years, and she was really mad and she was really hurt. Again, that's why we wrote these books so that you can pull this back before it goes that far. It doesn't have to go that way. And there are versions of helping a family heal that don't have to be so hurtful, I believe. Now, I'm always clear to say if a parent is abusive or can't respect boundaries or creates unsafe situations, obviously that's a cause for no contact. But let's get clear about what real abuse and trauma are. I actually provide checklists in my books because people need to understand what normal fighting looks like and what toxic, unhealthy people are capable of doing. Because a lot of what's going on in families is pretty normal. It's pretty normal dysfunction. And we're running around out here pointing fingers, calling people, very serious diagnostic names without really knowing if that's true. And I don't know. It just seems like we've really kind of gotten out of reality here. And I think when you really think about what parents do when you have parents who took care of you and provided shelter and safety and made sure you had an education and food, like, not, guess what? Not every parent is equipped to give you everything you need to be emotionally perfect or socially perfect. And that's just life. Like, if you get enough that you are safe, secure, and loved, you know what? I think you need to give your parents a break, even if they are annoying or rigid or judgmental, or, as I've said, even a little bit narcissistic. A little bit narcissistic does not compete with abusive. So, anyway, I'm totally on the side of adult children who want to heal. I'm also getting a little sick of hearing about the abuse and trauma they suffered, and it doesn't actually touch what real abuse and trauma are. So anyway, that's the difference I always want to look at. When you think about your parents, they can have behaved in all different ways. Maybe they had big careers, maybe they weren't really available, maybe they had issues, but were they actually trying to hurt you, or were they just trying to get by? So I try to think about that, with my parents, with other people's parents. When I talk to people, I recently was doing this with a young lady in her 20s, and I was trying to help her understand that even though she and her mom aren't in a good place and they're arguing, like, the things that her mom was doing, or she's not trying to hurt her. She might be really frustrated by her mom's behavior, but this does not qualify as toxic or abusive. So we kind of need to be a little bit nicer, sometimes. So, okay. Uh, I want to change the conversation a little bit from our therapist to blame to these are adult children capable of making their own decisions. After 4 years, I no longer thought what the therapist had told me was correct. Um, so I went and I found my mom, and I spent the next 6 months making her feel comfortable enough to let me back in. So I don't want to sit up here and tell therapists what to do. Y'all went to a lot of school, you know what you're doing. I'm only going to bring up a couple of points and take these as you will from somebody who went through this. One, being somebody that actually gave a version of events that caused a radical, series of events. Remember, you're only hearing the story from one side, And that person who's telling the story may not even know they're not telling the whole story, because it took a lot of self help for me to realize I wasn't telling the whole story. Obviously, clear abuse and trauma aside, telling somebody to go no contact is a direction that has major psychological impact for literally every person involved in that family. The siblings are going to suffer, the spouses suffer, extended family suffer, people have to pick sides. It gets so nasty. So be sure when you tell someone to do that, that you're not creating an absolute maelstrom for this entire family. As somebody who went through this, I wish the therapist had recommended some kind of temporary separation or break, or even had tried to play a mediator a little bit. I know that's hard, and sometimes you're not allowed to do that. But looking back on this, I really feel it didn't have to go the way that it did, and I regret it. My choice hurt a lot of people, and I had to be accountable for that for years. In some ways, I still have to be accountable for that. So, my takeaways for everybody, parents, kids, first of all, don't be so horribly offended if your kid is separated from you. It's not actually all about you. Um, and what I would say, and I say this when I speak publicly, do your best to thrive without your kids. They don't want to know you're suffering. They do not want to see endless emails or posts about what you've done to them. I know this sounds weird, but I always say kind of treat them like an ex and try to look happy without them. It's not that I'm suggesting you be inauthentic, but we tend to want to reconnect with people who seem like they're doing well, not stuck in that cycle of anger and bad feelings. So, next, and you may hate me for this, but like adult children, get a grip. Like, if your parents did their best, give them some grace. Wait until you have kids and are going through a divorce and see how well you handle that. We blame our parents for everything we aren't and everything we haven't achieved. But guess what? That doesn't play for adults. If you aren't launching, that's on you now. Get help, move, get a job, like whatever it is. But as somebody who formerly blamed my parents for all my problems, you're not actually going to get better until you stop. So figure out what you're so angry about and work through it. It is your job as an adult to build the life you want and to fix your mental health problems. Like, my parents gave me some wrong ideas about myself, about relationships, about money. And you know what? We've changed them. And you know what? Even my parents have shifted some of their ideas about all of this today. So I know this sounds mean, but blaming your parents for your problems makes you look worse than them. So, therapists understand these are hearts, families, and lives. And everybody needs to be treated with care, even the bad guy. I know that sounds weird, but like when you're giving people information that's going to direct their lives, it's going to impact everybody, and they're going to have to live with it for the rest of their lives. So, you just want to take into account that everybody's going to have really big feelings around this. Okay, so all of this comes from my books, The Mother-Daughter Relationship Makeover. That was the book that was in Oprah's book club, and that Oprah Daily did a big feature, which is sort of how this all began. After that, we wrote the workbook, and I am now teaching that for the first time. So in the background, I'm starting to build our seminar, and I will be sharing more about that with time, because teaching it for the first time has shown me that people really love it. And I'm getting people walking into the room, in the facility, just hearing what we're talking about. And I'm just so, so happy, because my job here, what I am doing out here, is trying to help people communicate better, have more compassion with each other, see things a little bit differently, so that we don't have to go to this place of no contact, so that we don't have to do things and say things that are really, really hard to come back from. So, anyway, you know where you can find me. Reach Out Recovery, Lindsay Glass author. Please follow, please like. I will be doing more of these, especially as the workbook stuff comes together. And as always, I appreciate all of you. I wish you the best. And trust me, I know the struggle is real.